You're listening to the Good Question Podcast with Richard Jacobs. Our goal is to make each of our guests exclaim, that's a good question. I don't know the answer. Because when that happens, it means you, the listener, may be inspired to learn more beyond the interview and to ask great questions yourself that lead to new insights. In this podcast, we cover historical and current anthropology, comparative religion, and history. Welcome, and let's get started.
Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Good Question Podcast. My guest today is Yarusi. He's a keynote speaker. He's an apartment building investor. He does multifamily investing for passive investors and a multifamily mentor as well. So we're going to talk about his programs and how he does what he does and how he helps people, get the life that they want through real estate investing, it looks like. So welcome, Jason. Thank you.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, let's start a little bit with your background. How did you get into real estate investing and, what are some of the troubles and turmoils you had back in the day and where are you at today?
Sure. So pretty non-traditional route. I went to school for a finance degree, but I really had no motivation to leave school and to go into finance. And so I ended up, moving into New York City and started working as a bartender and a waiter for a number of years there. Just was not really happy with my life, right? I wasn't happy with the choice I was making, the results I was getting, right? The outcomes. I was really putting a lot of outward blame on why I wasn't having success in my life, right? Well, over the course of those couple of years, one night I leave a bar and I start to take my bike across New York City towards my apartment, and out of nowhere, I got hit by a car and thrown in the air, and woke up, got taken to the hospital, a couple broken bones, a pin in my wrist, some, stitches in my face and my head. And I came to the point where I was leaving the hospital, and the only thing I could think about was I wanted to figure out how I could get back to work quickly because I needed to get back to my bartender job so I could have money for rent. And I had this pause where I was like, okay, that is absolutely crazy. All you've been thinking and all you've been putting out there is just how much you don't like and despise where you are. And now this thing happens where you get hit by a car and all I can think about is getting back to where I don't want to be. And I deal with myself where I was like, okay, listen, if you are going to say that this is okay, then you have to be okay with these crazy results you keep getting. You stop complaining about it, or you got to change something. And I didn't quite know what that something was, but what I started to do is that, over the course of the next couple of days, couple of weeks, couple of months, I started to just make changes, right? I started to make some things that were more into a positive momentum. So I started to get up earlier, stop drinking at night, stop staying out late, stop really put my energy where it didn't need to be, start having a workout routine, and over little times, things started to really catapult and snowball for me, where I went from working in restaurants and bars to owning a bar and restaurant in New York City to opening and selling a brewery in New York City this is right before Hurricane Sandy happened. And then that happened. And I ended up moving out to New Jersey because my dad's construction business was really heavily involved in storm remediation work. And so he lifts and moves houses. He's retired now. So went out there and helped him scale that business dramatically. But what had happened over the course of the time is that, I met my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, and she became pregnant with our first child, and I had no time. I was running ragged out there, selling leads, chasing leads, just doing all these things where it's front service work, where I had to show up and be very transactional, both in the construction world, in the bar world, and now we started to do real estate. And we started to do flipping, wholesaling, and a lot of other things that required a lot of my time and energy on the front facing forward, right? Running to the store, meeting with contractors, meeting with tenants. And I found that I had to find another way if I was ever going to get back space and control, and especially have time with my kids. So kept really going out there, studying what was available. And I came upon a podcast, like this, where someone was talking about buying large apartment communities. And that really stuck with me. I'd understand, the scalability in restaurants, where a small restaurant and a large restaurant had similar practices, but the large restaurant had more economies of scale. So that really stood out to me. And I went all in on learning about buying apartment buildings. And I slowly, over the course of about a year and a half, made the transition in about 2015 to 2017 of learning everything I can, putting blinders on, finding out the process, the practices to buy an apartment community. And then while in New Jersey, I brought my first apartment community. It was 94 units in Louisville, Kentucky. And then that's been the first of those acquisitions over the course of time of about, I think we've done a little over 3,500 units that we've purchased today, mainly down here in the Southeast, where I'm now based in Tennessee.
Very cool. Okay. So what kind of real estate did you buy? Like small multifamily, large, or what did you start with?
Yeah, so I went directly to large, right? So I went to buy at 94 unit was the first one I bought in Louisville, Kentucky. And the majority of them, it's been, my smallest one has been 24 units and the largest one has been 355 units. So we would typically do 100 to 200 is the prime spot for us because that allows us to put together a process to have a full on-site team to manage the property. And we found that economically, efficiently, really with the process is honestly the best route for us if we can find that size of property. But when we have a kind of just scale in the market like we do here in Murfreesboro, we will add on smaller opportunities because we already have the foundation built and the system and the teams in place.
Okay. What was it like when you contemplated buying an apartment building? I mean, you had done a bar by this time, so I would guess that you didn't see it as this impossible task. And how can anyone own a building? What was your mindset when you first contemplated this?
It's constantly a part of just learning not to be in a state of lack, right? And so for so many years, it just seemed like that wouldn't be something that I could do, right? And by the time I had learned about apartment communities, I had done some other forms of real estate and had some moderate success there. So when I came upon apartment investing, I already had my mind set in the real estate space. So I was sold there. But what I had to do was create the confidence within myself that I could implement the process. And what helped with that is I started to, I found a mentor, I found other people that were doing this, and I saw exactly what they're doing and then just started taking the steps. So it got away from looking at the big goal of, let's buy this big building and said, okay, what are the steps that they do effectively each day to prepare themselves for when that opportunity comes? So it was a work in progress, right? As we've continued to grow. But now the confidence is fortified because we have the proof of concept, we have the projects we've done, we have the back end, the front end built together where it becomes more efficiently. But on the front side, what created the confidence was surrounding myself with people who are doing this process and looking at this in actual steps instead of just one overarching far-ending goal.
So if someone wants to invest in real estate, what kind of characteristics do they have to be able to go into apartment buildings? And is this something that no one should ever do when they first start, only after they get a lot of experience? Or, what's your recommendation for people that want to do it?
It depends on the trade-off from where you're coming from to where you are, right? If you do, financial modeling and a financial analysis or have some other, management experience in other spots, right, and can understand that, it can speak well to this business where you can have that trade-off to move into it, right? If you come here with, no management experience or leadership experience or maybe investing experience outside of this, there'll be more hurdles for you to get to here, right? So it really comes off from the trade-off of what you're doing currently of how that can be used here. Because in my business, there's the lead generation, right? The front end of, meeting people, finding opportunities. Then there's the underwriting and due diligence side of it, right? So from really the back end of just analyzing the deal and the due diligence of just understanding what you actually have in front of you. There's the asset management, which is really the management of the deal from, onset throughout the hold of the deal all the way to the sale. There's the investor relations, right? Working with the investors that we bring on board, both from just, investor expectations and communication throughout the hold and also raising capital. And then there's the balance sheet or that you would have to have or the net worth to be able to sign onto some of the deals here or some of the loans. So you can come in and fill one of those roles, right? And be a partner in the team, or you can wear all those hats. In the beginning, my wife and I wore all those hats, and we found that as we grew, it was better to build a team around us because we were becoming the linchpin that was holding us back because there wasn't just enough time or enough us to be able to complete all these things actively and successfully.
So what size units did you deal with in the beginning, and now what size complexes of units?
So yeah, again, that first one was 94 units, 94. So it was 94 apartment buildings. It was 5 buildings. And throughout, we just closed on 290 units. That was about 4 months ago, and about 2 months ago, we closed on 355 units. So it's been throughout, but again, that sweet spot for anyone listening is that there's a certain point, and it can vary a little bit on market, but somewhere between 65 to 85 units where if you have that size, you can afford to have a full-time leasing person and a full-time maintenance person that can be carried by the operations of the property. And that can be very beneficial to you because if not, then you're managing it off-site, you're paying more for all different parts of the processes, you're paying more for all the trades to come there, you're just paying more overall as a complex per unit. So we typically look for projects that can afford to carry a full-time back-end, leasing office, of course, maintenance person or people that can be afforded by the property.
So it's about a 1 to 70 ratio, perhaps. Yeah, it's worth it. to having like a dedicated maintenance person, dedicated property manager, dedicated people on the property.
Really, the goal would be to 100 units, but at a certain point, 60 to 80 units, it's hard not to have one. And so you may pay a little bit more than you would like per unit at that range, the 1 to 70 range. But on that front, it's hard to not have them at that size. So if you are anywhere around that, you're almost forced to it, but it's better number-wise where you can 1 to 90 to 1 to 100. It's a more logical or more truthful number there.
Okay. I'd say a good benchmark, maybe it'd be 100 to 1, but that makes sense. Okay. So what's 90 some odd for the first investment seems pretty ambitious. What do you think about people that are like, I want to start with a duplex, triplex, 4-unit, not commercial side, or for people that are new who really want to get into it, what's a good size that they'd be able to tackle, maybe on their own or by having 1 or 2 partners with them?
You can do like a SWOT analysis, right, for yourself, or even just a pros and cons. And you could put that down for both smaller and larger assets, because that's really going to set the stage for what you want, right? For what your goal is here. For ourselves, we were looking at growing a business, right? So for us to do a smaller property, if we want to get to be able to buy at scale, a smaller property, say it's 10 units, right? Well, if a 10 unit has 3 units vacant, it's 70% occupied, right? On the other side, if you have a 100 unit property and 3 vacants, 97% occupied. The 10 unit, I can't afford to have a full-time maintenance person, a full-time leasing person. The 100 unit, I can afford to have a full-time leasing person, a full-time maintenance person. If it's, 4 units and under, the loan is going to be predicated by your income, like how you can carry that loan. Where a larger property, the 100 unit property, the loan, although it's going to look at your balance sheet, right, your net worth, it's more exposed to the operations of the property, right? The property's carrying it. So it speaks better. You'll get better loan terms from there. Visibility on contracts and other things that can be other value add drivers, cable contracts, laundry contracts, utility contracts. They're going to speak to larger properties. So it's going to give you other levers you can pull, where on a smaller property, there's less levers you can pull because it's not as valuable to the industry for you to go out there to be able to sell that project. You, as a management style, from a property management style, smaller properties, you can find management companies, but typically it's going to be hard to be able to have the property carry a management company at their cost. Right? So it's going to be more on you managing the property and less on others. You could find other companies, but typically I find the more professional companies, manage the larger assets. You'll find a more professional outfit to manage the larger properties. So from a pros cons perspective, the economies of scale ability for me made more sense for me to go to a larger property, because whether you're doing a 10 unit or you're doing a 100 unit, systematically you're doing the same steps, but in a notion, you're just doing more numbers, more zeros with the larger property. So mentality-wise, if your mind is ready to go larger, there's a lot of benefits to go larger as long as you have the process down for whether you want smaller or larger, because then you can be successful in both arenas.
That makes sense. Okay. So for these larger buildings, is this the space where like top competitors are, big institutional investors and, little guys can't compete? Like, where is that space where people can still do stuff on their own or within their own network and not be like really sophisticated to get in?
The larger you go, the more institutional players that will be there. And that will also speak to the markets, right? The more, we'll say Class A or competitive markets you're in, your Miamis, your New York cities, your LAs, your San Diegos, right? You're going to have more institutional buyers that can be present, and your price per pound is going to be higher, right? It's going to be a more driven buyer, so there's going to bring more competition. Same thing with Nashville. Nashville, it's a pretty competitive market the larger you go. However, in the space we're dealing with, we're competing against a lot of shops that are similar like kind size to us, some smaller, some larger, right? But it's still competitive with our range. So for yourself, you have to ask the question, right? You're going to face competition wherever you are. We probably face more of a professional buyer at our stage, where you might have a different competition level if you're on a 2 to 4 unit, because it might be, experienced investor. It might be a mom and pop owner. It might be someone looking to house hack, right? So at all levels, it's going to be different competition. It just goes on where you're competing at.
Okay. And then, are you doing like a partnership where you're the general partner and you take on limited partners to buy a building? Or how do you structure the deals that you do? How do you recommend, or how do you suggest to people that they get started?
Yeah. So there's a million ways to skin the cat, but 80% of our projects are syndication. And that entails that we are the general partners. We will find a deal, secure the deal, package the deal, present the deal, close the deal, manage the deal, all the way through to the finish. And for that, to help with funding, the down payment, the closing costs, the construction budget, and any of the fee structure as part of the project, we will bring on limited partners. And so they will come out in a limited passive capacity. They will put in money alongside ourselves, and together we will buy this under a new LLC created for the property.
Okay, but again, how do people invest, and what's typical investment look like?
Yeah. So for us, we started out that first deal, we did that at $25,000 minimum. Now, as we've grown and we've done bigger projects, we put it at $50,000 and sometimes $100,000, but typically $50,000 is a minimum investment that we have there. So if people want to learn more, just even learn more about the process, right? You could go over to our current website, yarusiholdings.com. Has everything about what we do, what we've done in the past, right? And also some of the deals that we are working on or currently working on. And you can see our investor portal there that you want to learn more.
Okay, well, very good. So what's the best way for people to find out more? What are some of the places they can go? I don't know if you have videos out. What's the best place for people to start to engage and learn about this?
Yeah, sure. So we have a podcast called Multifamily Live Podcast. Find a lot just about multifamily as it is there. You can go over to our site again, yarusiholdings.com. That can go there.
YARUSI?
Correct. Yeah, YARUSIholdings.com.
Okay. And that's the best way for people to get started, or go to the Multifamily Podcast, right?
Correct. Yeah, there we have some free downloads, some resources you can take off the website just to learn more about the space. We have other things you can link out to the podcast and some of our videos to learn more just about the ins and outs of the actual work that goes into there. But, and if you want to schedule a call, learn more about investing, feel free. Be happy to have us talk to you.
Okay, very good. Well, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Rich. Great to be here.
Thank you for listening to the Good Question Podcast. Please email support@thegoodquestionpodcast.com if you have any referrals to great guests for us to interview. Visit thegoodquestionpodcast.com to hear more interviews. And please help us spread the word by rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to this podcast.